These are the most interesting historical photos and unusual objects from the past. Let's get 100,000 subscribers. An aquarium show staged divers playing table tennis while a shark drifted by, captured with early scuba gear. Airlines and props reveal a controlled scene made to amaze viewers. A 1956 promotional photo shows a man putting a record in his mouth beside a record player. Early records were often brittle shellac before vinyl became common, which made dramatic photos like this easy to stage. A mid-19th century Fisk-style cast metal coffin with a glass window, made for long train travel and to preserve the body with an airtight seal. The window let families confirm identity during quarantine without opening the lid. Union officers on horseback inspect long lines of cannon while troops stand in formation after the Battle of Gettysburg in July 1863. This moment signaled a key turn in the American Civil War, as the North stopped the last big advance of the South. A woman stands in the ruins of San Francisco after the earthquake of April 1906, holding a family photo. The magnitude 7.9 event and fires reshaped the city, and about 3,000 lives were lost. Winston Churchill stands on a London rooftop during the Blitz in September 1940. Fires rise across the city as he stays in view to lift spirit and show resolve. A football player makes a staged catch with a whole turkey during a photo shoot for a Thanksgiving game. Turkey Day games have been part of American football since the 1920s. A crowd fills the Alabama state capitol steps as Jefferson Davis takes the oath as President of the Confederate States in Montgomery on February 18, 1861. Otto Skorzeny was a German commando of World War II, known for leading the raid that freed Benito Mussolini in 1943. After the war, he was tried, escaped custody, and later worked in Spain and Latin America, leaving a disputed legacy. Scientists watched the Trinity test in New Mexico on July 16, 1945, as a vast mushroom cloud climbs into the sky. Its flash fused desert sand into green glass called trinitite and began the atomic age. Workers stand inside a Manchester ironworks in 1898 with sparks flying and giant flywheels turning. Factories like this, fed by coal and steam, helped make the city a world hub for machines and metal by 1900. An early biplane tips over in a field as bystanders arrive in a motor car to help. In the 1910s, many airfields shared space with roads, so rare car and plane mishaps like this did happen. Golfer Joe Kirkwood performs a daring trick shot with the ball resting on a helper's mouth as the crowd watches. He toured in the 1930s and became famous for trick shots that drew big crowds. Bronze mortar and pestle from Germany, used to grind herbs and medicine in a home or small shop. The bell shape, side handles, and raised date band point to the 1700s and to bell metal casting. An early stunt rider speeds up a wooden ramp to clear 3 calm volunteers during a traveling show. In the 1920s, board track shows let riders climb steep wooden walls using only speed and balance. British comedian Marty Feldman smiles in a beret and paisley shirt, famous for his wide eyes and odd humor. He played Iger in Young Frankenstein in 1974, and his look came from a thyroid eye condition. The first official transit of the Panama Canal came on August 15, 1914, when the ship Ancon moved through the new locks. The canal cut some routes by about 8,000 miles and cost about 5,600 workers their lives, reshaping trade and power. Often shared as Theodore Roosevelt facing an angry elephant, this is a staged safari scene, not a real 1902 event. Roosevelt's true African safari happened in 1909 to 1910 after his presidency. 2 dolls sit under a tangle of wires from an early permanent wave machine while a girl reads beside them. In the 1920s and 1930s, these salon machines used heated coils and many cords to set curls, and demos often looked like this. A house being moved to a new site slipped off its truck on a narrow bridge, tilting into the gap while crews plan a recovery. In the mid-20th century, Many wooden houses were moved on dollies, and rare mishaps like this came from sharp turns and soft ground. Baseball legends Babe Ruth and Walter Johnson hold prize roosters at a ballpark in 1927. That year, Ruth hit 60 home runs and New York won the World Series, a season many call the greatest. Guests in masks watch a screen while sitting below the surface at the premiere of the film Underwater. Held at Silver Springs in Florida in 1955, it was billed as the first underwater movie premiere, and the audience heard the sound through submerged speaker. On April 7, 1927, the first television broadcast in the United States showed Herbert Hoover speaking to a room of engineers. Walter Sherman Gifford of the American Telephone and Telegraph Company watched the test, a feat built by more than 1,000 workers and new wire links. Helen Keller, blind and deaf since 19 months old, makes juice in her kitchen at age 75. The author and advocate used touch and hand signs to communicate and taught people worldwide about equal rights. Walt Disney stands at the wheel of the Mark Twain riverboat on Disneyland's opening day in 1955, with Mickey Mouse at his side. The new park mixed a real steam riverboat with make-believe lands and soon drew record crowds. Red flags sweep across Petrograd in October 1917 as marchers move on the Winter Palace and seize power. The takeover launched Bolshevik rule, reshaped the 20th century, and set the path to the long Cold War. A mother reaches for her child through a train window in Berlin during the Kindertransport in September 1939. About 10,000 Jewish children found safety in Britain, and most were never reunited with their parents. At a Vienna ball in late July 1914, a couple shares a last dance as Austria-Hungary moves toward war with Serbia. World War I began on July 28, 1914, and would kill about 17 million people by 1918. This is a large steam autoclave with a wheel door, rails, and grates for loading mattresses, bedding, and carts. It used high-pressure steam near 120 degrees Celsius to clean and sanitize hospital items in the early to mid-20th century. On May 16, 1929, the first Academy Awards banquet filled the Roosevelt Hotel ballroom in Hollywood. 270 guests paid $5, winners were announced in advance, and the top film was Wings, making the ceremony a 15-minute formality. Two performers in drag are led away by an officer after a show in New York City in 1962. Laws against cross-dressing were still used then, and protests at Stonewall in 1969 helped change the course of rights. Sean Connery lines up at the Mr. Universe contest in 1953 in the tall class. He placed third that year, 9 years before his first James Bond film. Inside the Statue of Liberty's face, you see the curved copper skin with ribs, braces, and rivets. The copper is about 2.5 millimeters thick, and the flexible frame by Gustave Eiffel lets the face move gently in strong wind. A miner crawls through rock with a carbide lamp after an explosion at the Monongah coal mines in West Virginia on December 6, 1907. The disaster became the deadliest in United States mining, with about 362 lives lost. A Soviet soldier writes a last letter home amid the ruins of Stalingrad in the winter of 1942 to 1943. The battle became a turning point on the Eastern Front, with huge losses and a city nearly destroyed. Soviet soldiers moved through a winter street in Budapest during the battle in 1945. The city saw hard house to house, fighting before German and Hungarian forces surrendered in February 1945. Daylight shows Japanese tanks stranded near Henderson Field on Guadalcanal after the night attack of October 23, 1942. Marine guns stopped the thrust, and 9 tanks were lost in the fight. 2 ironworkers balance on a steel beam high above Manhattan during construction of the Empire State Building in 1931. The skyscraper reached 381 meters and was finished in just over 1 year, becoming a symbol of New York. Police carry a woman on a stretcher down a stairwell in New York in 1944 after a raid on a secret clinic. The case showed the hidden risks people faced and pushed debate that later led to new health laws. Families hurry from St. Pierre, Martinique, moments before Mount Pelée erupts on May 8, 1902. A hot ash cloud raced at hundreds of kilometers per hour, and the city was ruined, with only a few people surviving. Sailors crowd the narrow hull of USS Holland during early dive trials in 1900. This small craft became the first United States Navy submarine and opened the modern era of undersea warfare. President Woodrow Wilson shows a rare open smile, revealing the dental troubles he carried for years. He led the United States in World War I and later won the Nobel Peace Prize for his plan for the League of Nations. An American soldier and a Mexican soldier stand on each side of a wooden border marker in Arizona in 1915. The scene shows routine patrols during the Mexican Revolution era near towns like Douglas. A sea of people stands still for the 2-minute silence on Armistice Day after World War I. The tradition began in 1919, and at 11 o'clock on November 11, cities around the world paused to honor the fallen. An old Texas cowboy rests by his saddle as new barbed wire fences cut across the plains in 1895. The fencing ended the open range era and turned wide grazing lands into farms and ranches within a few decades. Alexander Fleming notices a mold ring in a petri dish in London in September 1928, where the bacteria would not grow. This chance finding became penicillin and opened the antibiotic era, saving millions of lives. An African-American teacher starts the first lesson in a newly integrated Southern school in 1954. After the Supreme Court case, Brown versus Board of Education, classrooms like this slowly opened to all children and began to reshape the nation. Wire soap saver from the 1800s used to hold small soap scraps in a mesh basket for dishwater. People swirled it in hot water to make suds and use every last bit of soap. United States soldiers crawl ashore at Talisay Beach on Cebu in the Philippines on March 26, 1945. The landing helped free Cebu City within days and opened airfields for the final push across the islands. A young man holds a child outside an American orphanage in 1953 as they cry during an adoption. Post-war adoptions rose in the United States, and this moment marks a new family formed from loss and hope. An acrobat at the Ringling Brothers Circus hangs high above the ring in 1936, twisting in the air with no safety line. Crowds gasped as daring stunts like this helped make big top shows the most watched live entertainment in America. Franca Viola, a teenager in Sicily in 1963, was kidnapped by a former suitor. She refused a so-called rehabilitating marriage, testified in court, and helped push Italy to end that custom and change its laws. Polish child Krystyna Treśniewska is photographed in a striped uniform at Auschwitz. She was among thousands of children who did not survive the camp, preserved only by these grim intake photos. French veteran Georges Roy from Normandy stands with his bride after the war, having lost both arms and his sight. France called such men gueules cassées, and their group later funded memorials and care for disabled veterans. A woman at Rockaway Beach receives a ticket for indecent exposure in 1946, when rules banned strapless two-piece suits. Moments like this pushed beach fashion to change as dress codes slowly eased after the war. A British soldier directs a German woman away during a required newsreel that showed camp conditions after the war. Allied troops made towns watch these films to face what happened and learn the truth. A Seljuk metal box uses rotating dials and hidden catches to form an early combination lock. Its complex design allows billions of possible codes, a medieval feat of craft and security. A woman in black touches the cool marble at the Taj Mahal in Agra. The White Mausoleum was finished in 1653 for Mumtaz Mahal, the beloved wife of Emperor Shah Jahan. In 1847 in Bristol, Joseph Storrs Fry made the first solid eating chocolate by mixing cocoa powder with cocoa butter and sugar. This invention turned cocoa from a drink into a portable bar and started modern chocolate bars. A captured German Messerschmitt 109E was set outside St. Nicholas Church in Durham in 1940 during the Battle of Britain. The public view raised money for the War Fund and let people see the rival plane up close. Men sit in a trench under guard during the 1965 crisis in Indonesia when the military and allied groups targeted suspected communists. In the following months, hundreds of thousands were detained and many never returned. Crowds watched the wreckage of the Hagenbeck-Wallace Circus trains after a 4 a.m. crash in Hammond, Indiana on June 22, 1918. The disaster killed 89 and injured about 150, the deadliest circus train wreck in U.S. history. A ship's engine order telegraph made by Chadburns of Liverpool and London. It let the bridge signal the engine room for speed and direction, dead slow, half, full, ahead, or astern. Texas, 1932. A mother holds her hungry baby outside a small relief tent during the Dust Bowl. The scene shows fear and strength as drought and dust storms ruined farms and forced many families to flee. Tsarist Russia, 1912. A political prisoner uses a stick to teach letters on the cell floor as inmates sit around him. The improvised class shows literacy as quiet resistance and hope inside a harsh prison. This is a taffrail log, a mechanical boat speed meter. The finned fish is towed behind and spins a cable to the round gauge, which shows speed in knots and distance. A young Princess Elizabeth is carried in a pram up the steps of Balmoral Castle in 1927. Attendants lift her while a crowd watches from below. A packed market fills Wentworth Street in London's East End in 1908, with stalls under awnings and crowds in shawls and caps. The scene shows working-class life and immigrant trade in a narrow lane of Spitalfields. Harlem's 8th Avenue after the 25.8-inch New York blizzard of December 26-27, 1947, seen from 121st Street. Streetcars and cars sit buried while people carve paths through a silent, white city. A railway conductor runs beside a moving train, reaching with a long brake hose to slow the cars on an alpine descent in 1895. His risky move buys time for passengers as failing brakes are brought under control. A boy clings to a floating log during a Texas flood in May 1931. Rescuers snag him with a rope as fast muddy water sweeps debris by. A horse-drawn emergency carriage moves through Vienna in the late 1800s with medics on board. Crowds watch as the crew rushes a patient to hospital. Soviet DP-5A Geiger counter from the 1960s in a bakelite case with Russian labels made to detect gamma radiation and, with a probe, beta rays. Its range is about 0.05 to 200 Roentgen per hour, and it was standard kit for civil defense field surveys. Delaware Prison Yard, 1907. Inmates stand in a pillory while another faces the state's whipping post, a practice still legal for decades after this photo. Delaware kept the whipping post on the books until 1972, with the last recorded flogging in 1952. Brittany Murphy and Jonathan Brandis at prom in 1995, two rising teen actors before Clueless and Sequest DSV made them fan favorites. A rare peek at future 1990s screen icons on a normal night out. Sean Connery and Ursula Andress relax between takes in Jamaica while filming the first James Bond movie, Dr. No, in 1962. The film launched the 007 series and made Andress's white bikini entrance a pop culture landmark. In 1947, future Hercules star Steve Reeves toured the United States promoting fitness with Lou Stockton and trailblazing strongwoman Abby Pudgy Stockton. That same year, he won Mr. America, helping spark America's modern muscle culture. Storage tanks and horse carts at the Nobel Brothers Petroleum Company in Baku during the 1890s oil boom. Founded as Branobel in 1879, the firm pioneered pipelines and the Zoroaster oil tanker and helped make Baku the world's top oil producer at the time. Orson Welles faces reporters after his War of the Worlds radio play in October 1938, saying it was only a drama. The famous mass panic story was mostly a newspaper myth used to undermine radio's rise. Queen Elizabeth II attends a film screening at St. James Theatre in Auckland during her first royal tour in 1953. She was the first reigning monarch to visit New Zealand, and the tour drew huge crowds and charity events at cinemas. In 1959, a camel caravan of steppe families heads for a permanent village, marking the state-led settling of Central Asian nomads. Within a decade, most herders in the region had moved into towns, ending millennia of seasonal journeys across the open grasslands. A Paris stage pair performs at the Moulin Rouge in late 1918, as many artists were called to serve during World War I. The soaring lift feels like a goodbye to the stage, with the armistice only days away on November 11, 1918. Germany, November 1923. A man burns banknotes because hyperinflation made paper money worth less than firewood. Prices doubled in hours, and a loaf could cost billions of marks, wiping out savings. Germany, May 1945. A displaced child clutches the only toy left after an air raid, standing in the ruins of his town. For many children in the war's final days, a small doll was the last link to home and family. Albania, 1950. Young women practice prone rifle drills in open fields during a national defense course. Images like this were staged for newsreels to promote discipline and equal duty ideals. The Mochita family waits in Hayward, California, with numbered tags and name-marked bags for mandatory relocation under Executive Order 9066 on May 8, 1942. A school bus in Delaware is packed with children in 1981 Halloween costumes from Austin D. Baltz Elementary, all masks and capes filling the seats. Store-bought outfits from brands like Ben Cooper and Collegeville were the norm for school parades before softer masks and new safety rules took over. A dentist lines up a patient at a 1960-era dental X-ray machine, the bulky kind that aimed a narrow beam at film held in the mouth. Back then, doses were lower than early 1900s gear, but still higher than modern digital X-rays, and shielding was limited. Carrie Fisher playfully tries on Peter Weller's oversized frames at a Giorgio Armani runway in 1980, the year her film The Empire Strikes Back premiered. The candid snap sums up the early 1980s fashion Hollywood crossover as Armani's clean style began its big rise. Victorian nurses tend to a patient in a London fever ward, applying hand-washing, clean linens, and airflow, ideas championed by Florence Nightingale. Her data-driven reforms in the 1850s slashed hospital fatality rates and helped found modern professional nursing. Golden Spike Ceremony at Promontory Summit, Utah, on 10 May 1869, where Union Pacific and Central Pacific Rails finally met to form the first U.S. transcontinental railroad. The link cut coast-to-coast travel from months to about a week, supercharged Western trade and settlement. Teenage Albert Einstein with his sister Maya around 1894, just before their family moved from Germany to Italy. He is about 15 and she is 13. Maya later became a literature scholar and Albert's close confidant. A famed abolitionist leader speaks to a packed pavilion on March 26, 1892, under a canopy of flags. He is 74 years old. This is a hand-carved Indian dowry chest once used to carry wedding gifts and family valuables. Many examples from Rajasthan have iron straps, round studs for strength, and sometimes a hidden compartment. A Hollywood icon holds hands with her young co-star at a film premiere in 1953. The pair would appear together in the Western River of No Return the next year. Nuns care for influenza patients in a crowded New York ward in 1918. The pandemic caused about 50 million deaths worldwide, and many sisters served without protection and fell ill. This is a mid-20th century mechanical calculator called an Oedner pinwheel. You set numbers with the sliders and turn the crank to add, subtract, multiply, and divide before electronic calculators. Newspaper staff escort deliveries during the Rand Revolt in 1922 on the Witwatersrand. The press moved under guard because strike unrest blocked routes and damaged vehicles. Soldiers block a rail line as miners gather during a tense labor dispute in 1939. In the Great Depression era, state troops were often used to keep rail traffic moving and prevent clashes. Two Belgian soldiers walk on a cobbled street in 1915, one guiding his bandaged comrade. Belgium was a major front in the First World War, and scenes like this show the strain on early trench campaigns. Wall-mounted map roller for storing and showing several large maps or charts made by Charles Parker Manufacturing. A pull cord spins the drum and a ratchet stops at each slot, a design common in offices and schools in the early 1900s. Egypt's first female paratrooper trains with a full jump pack in May 1971. She learned under the Army Chief's guidance and opened a new path for women in the service. Workers in the Paris metro wade through floodwater after a tunnel failure on 30 August 1906. The crisis became the system's first major incident and led to new safety rules for underground work. A circus tent in Hartford, Connecticut caught fire during a show on 6 July 1944. The wax and gasoline-coated canvas made flames race, causing 168 deaths and more than 700 injuries. On 16 October 1846, dentist William Morton demonstrated ether anesthesia during a tooth removal at Massachusetts Hospital. The patient slept through the procedure and woke without pain, starting a new era in care. This is a working tabletop steam engine that uses water and small fuel tablets. When heated, the boiler makes steam that turns the flywheel and shows how piston power works. Crowds build a street barricade in Copenhagen during the general strike on 30 June 1944. The stoppage paralyzed trams and shops and led the occupiers to ease curfews and release prisoners. French troops show a portrait of Charles de Gaulle to children in Britain during the Normandy landings in 1944. He led Free France from exile and became a symbol of hope before the return to Paris. Scottish soldiers of the 3rd Carabiniers play football on a rough field by the Chindwin River in Burma in 1944. Games like this kept unit spirit high before hard jungle patrols. Men in Kerala perform Margam Kali, a circle dance that tells the story of St. Thomas the Apostle in 1924. This folk art uses claps, songs, and steps from a community that traces its roots to the 1st century. This is the sight glass from an old gasoline pump, turned sideways with the tap still attached. Fuel once rose in the glass to measure gallons before it flowed to the hose. This staged photo shows a 3-funnel liner sinking, often sold as a Titanic scene. The real Titanic had 4 funnels and flew British flags, not an American flag. Rescuers lift a coal miner from a collapsed mine in West Virginia after 4 days underground in 1954. He was one of a few survivors from 89 workers thanks to a non-stop 96-hour rescue. Young workers jump from the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory in New York on March 25, 1911, as smoke and fire close in. Locked doors and failed nets led to 146 deaths and new labor safety laws. This is a sheaf-tying clamp used on farms to bundle grain stalks after cutting. Twine ran through the jaws to wrap a tight bundle for drying and threshing. A young girl in Vietnam around 1910 wears a wrapped skirt and a fitted blouse with a silver anklet. Her top-knot hair and simple jewelry were common for children in that time. 2 circus acrobats practice a head balancing act on 27 July 1950, captured on vivid Kodachrome film. This act needs extreme neck strength and perfect balance, and crowds loved it in the mid-20th century. Marilyn Monroe smiles with members of the Maryland Six, a devoted fan group in the 1950s. They traded tips to find her at studios, theaters, and hotels almost every day. 6 United States Marines raised the flag on Mount Suribachi, Iwo Jima, on February 23, 1945, in Joe Rosenthal's photograph. The picture won a Pulitzer Prize and became a symbol of the Pacific War, and 3 of the 6 later died on the island. A prospector near Kimberley holds an early large diamond in 1869, weighing 21 1/4 carats. This find sparked a diamond rush that reshaped South Africa and global trade. This is a spring lancet from the 19th to early 20th century, once used by doctors to make small cuts and draw a drop of blood. Pressing the button fires the blade, and the leather case held the tool and extras. A young United States Army paratrooper plays guitar with buddies on bass in the early 1960s. He soon left the service and became one of the most influential guitarists in rock history. A Scottish man named Angus Barbieri completed a medically supervised fast that lasted 382 days in 1965 to 1966. He went from about 456 pounds to around 180 pounds while taking vitamins. Free French soldiers dispose of an enemy banner by fire during the liberation of France in 1944. Scenes like this marked the end of occupation and the return of the French flag in many towns. Gandhi leads the Salt March in 1930, walking about 240 miles to the sea at Dandi to break the salt law. The protest drew world attention and led to about 60,000 arrests, pushing India toward freedom. A researcher stands in the flattened forest left by the Tunguska blast in 1908. The explosion leveled about 80 million trees across remote Siberia. Mata Hari, a Dutch stage star, faces a wartime court in Paris in 1917 on spy charges. Her stage name means Eye of the Day in Malay, and though she was found guilty and died that year, historians still debate the proof. In 1856, a well digger at Pompeii uncovered a marble statue hidden under ash. The find sped up organized digs that revealed homes, frescoes, and more than 20,000 artifacts from a city sealed by Mount Vesuvius for almost 2,000 years. French prisoners of war fight beside Slovak partisans in 1944 during the National Uprising. About 450 men formed the Foch Battalion and used captured machine guns against occupying forces. Lockheed Propulsion Company tests a large solid rocket motor in the foothills near Redlands, California, in the 1960s. Static fires like this burned for over a minute and sent a smoke column thousands of feet high that people could hear from many miles away. Abraham Jones cracks rock beside his cabin in Alabama around 1937. He was said to be 112 years old and a formerly enslaved person who still worked with steady hands. This is a cable splicer's lead end plate casting kit used by telephone crews before the 1980s. The rings set the plate size, and the round plugs made cable openings, while a level kept the pour flat for a snug, weather-tight seal. In September 1964, Malcolm X met with leaders of the Palestine Liberation Organization in Cairo after a visit to Gaza. He was building a global network for human rights and anti-colonial causes just months before his death. Police raid the Stonewall Inn in New York on June 28, 1969, captured in the only known photo from that night. The clash sparked days of protests and became a landmark moment in the modern gay rights movement. A young protester in Bethlehem in 1988 wears a Jesus sweatshirt as smoke from street barricades drifts behind him. Palestinian Christians joined these demonstrations with others from the city's diverse communities. A traveling pharmaceutical sample case from the early 20th century, packed with glass vials of powders, pills, and tinctures used to show doctors new remedies. Sales agents carried sets like this, and many contents are now tightly regulated or obsolete. A Zoroastrian family gathers in a mud brick room in Iran in the 1960s. Their ancient faith, taught by Zarathustra over 3,000 years ago, honors sacred fire as a symbol of truth and good deeds. An English tailor fits a woman into a jacket and trousers in the 1890s, when tailor-made suits for women were just starting to appear. Trousers on women were still shocking and sometimes restricted by local rules, yet the look pushed work and movement into a new era. Gustave Eiffel stands at the base of his new tower in Paris in 1889. Built for the World's Fair, The 300-meter lattice used about 18,000 iron pieces joined by more than 2 million rivets, and soon turned critics into admirers. Workers in Chicago march on May 1, 1886, demanding an 8-hour workday. A clash at Haymarket Square soon after left people dead and turned May Day into a global Labor Day. In July 1518, a woman in Strasbourg began to dance and could not stop. Within weeks, more than 400 people joined, some collapsing from exhaustion as leaders even hired musicians to calm it. The cause is still debated, from mass stress to rye fungus. At age 100, Duke C. Finch is helped to the polls in 1948 to cast his ballot. His steady walk shows how civic duty can outlast a century. This is a heavy leather blanking punch, also called a bridge or arch punch. You hit the top with a hammer to cut a cleaned leather shape inside the scalloped rim. Dina Sanichar was found as a child living with wolves in India and later taken to a mission in Uttar Pradesh. He never learned to speak, but copied people by smoking and using tools, and many say his story helped inspire the Jungle Book. John McCain rests after years as a prisoner in Vietnam from 1967 to 1973. He refused early release unless those captured before him were freed, and later served as a United States Senator and ran for president. In 1916, suffragists in Colorado put up a huge billboard urging women voters to oppose Woodrow Wilson because his party blocked a national vote for women. Colorado women had state voting rights since 1893, so activists used that power to push change for the whole nation. Western Australia, 1932. Soldiers with Lewis guns were sent to drive off huge emu flocks, ruining wheat fields. After nearly 10,000 rounds, the campaign removed only a few dozen birds and was halted as a costly failure. Boston, January 15, 1919. A 2.3 million-gallon molasses tank burst, sending a 25-foot wave racing at about 35 miles per hour through the streets. 21 people died, buildings were crushed, and the area smelled of syrup for weeks as crews shoveled the sticky flood. Vintage pocket hand warmer. Light the charcoal stick, close the case, and it glows gently to give hours of pocket heat. The felt lining insulates while letting a little air in, so the ember burns evenly, a favorite for winter fishing, camping, and rail work. In the freezing Alsace winter of 1945, French troops in the Colmar pocket pass a single cigarette between orders. Their drive with the 1st French Army and U.S. units sealed the last enemy hold west of the Rhine in February 1945. Street armor pushes through Seoul after the Incheon landing in September 1950 as troops fight block by block to retake the capital. Seoul would change hands 4 times during the Korean War, making it one of the most contested cities of the conflict. Teen fan Marvin Scott snapped Marilyn Monroe at Madison Square Garden in March 1955 during a celebrity circus night, catching her sequins and feathers from just a few feet away. Those photos kick-started Scott's long news career, proof that one bold night can change a life. Captured German soldiers scrub a Presse Cinema van of the French Army Film Service in liberated France, 1944. Minutes earlier, the same vehicle had been redirected to recover victims of reprisals, turning a news truck into an emergency tool of history. First U.S. combat parachute drop since the Korean War. 2nd Battalion, 503rd Infantry, 173rd Airborne Brigade jumps into South Vietnam on 22 February 1967 during Operation Junction City. About 845 paratroopers made the only major U.S. combat jump of the Vietnam War, and the last until Panama in 1989. Not a mining tool at all, it is an early coin-op jukebox, the Mills Model 801 from the 1930s. It spun 78 RPM records on a mechanical carousel, letting bars and diners pick songs long before digital playlists. Newlyweds Jimmy and Rosalind Carter leave their 1946 wedding in Plains, Georgia, the future president in his U.S. Navy uniform. Their partnership lasted 77 years, the longest marriage of any U.S. presidential couple, and spanned submarine duty, campaigns, and global humanitarian work. House pages rush a wounded visitor on a stretcher after gunmen opened fire from the Ladies' Gallery in the United States Capitol, 1954. 4 Puerto Rican nationalists fired about 30 shots, injuring 5 members of Congress. Azerbaijani families who fled the Khojaly tragedy gather at Agda Mosque in 1992, using it as a rare safe shelter in the region. The mosque became a hub for first aid, reunions, and evacuation as the Nagorno-Karabakh War displaced hundreds of thousands. At the Trinity test site in 1945, J. Robert Oppenheimer briefs New York Times reporter William Lawrence during a rare press visit. Lawrence, nicknamed Atomic Bill, became the only journalist to witness both the Trinity test and the mission over Nagasaki. American Ambulance Corps volunteers carry a wounded Finnish soldier through heavy snow during the Winter War, Finland, 1939 to 1940. This U.S. volunteer unit raised private funds, drove field ambulances near the front, and worked in cold that dropped below -40 degrees. New England Transportation Co., a subsidiary of the New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad, ran 777 miles of bus routes in 1926 to feed the railroad's 1,958 miles of track. It was an early multimodal network with coordinated rail and bus timetables. This is the upper section of a German MG-42 from the 1940s, likely a kept spare or deactivated relic. The MG-42 was known for an extreme rate of fire, about 1,200 to 1,500 shots per minute, and its design later evolved into the MG-3. A rare color view of a front-line trench shows wooden duckboards, sandbag walls, and a camouflaged roof of tree trunks, an engineered maze built to drain water and shield from view. Soldiers lived weeks here with mail, tea, and trench periscopes close at hand. On the day Brazil became a republic, Emperor Pedro II stands by his carriage moments before forced exile, November 15, 1889. That night, he and his family were sent by ship to Lisbon, ending a 58-year reign. He died in Paris 2 years later. Locked in a tiny stone cell after a bar fight, Ludger Silberus survived the 1902 Mount Pelee eruption because thick walls and a small vent shielded him from the hot ash cloud. He was one of the only known survivors from St. Pierre. Rita Hayworth's breakout pinup, shot by Bob Landry for life in 1941, became the most requested photo of American troops in the war. More than 5 million copies were printed and tucked into lockers, helmets, and bomber noses as a good luck charm. Christmas 1944. French troops opened small parcels near the front, a rare pause in a harsh winter campaign. As the Battle of the Bulge raged and Alsace was contested, aid groups and locals sent sweets, cigarettes, and letters to keep morale alive. Teenage Franklin Delano Roosevelt at Groton School in the 1890s, where headmaster Endicott Peabody taught that the strong must serve the weak. The duty and discipline he learned here shaped the future 32nd president who guided America through the Great Depression and World War II. Pit lane at the 24 Hours of Le Mans in 1953 with the Nash Healey team poised under their banners. That year, Jaguar's disc brake C-Type won at record pace, a breakthrough moment for endurance racing technology. Geronimo, the famed Chiricahua Apache leader, was photographed at Fort Sill in February 1909, just days before he died at age 79. After a fall from his horse in the cold, he became ill with pneumonia, and his name endures as a symbol of courage and unbroken spirit. Not a harness at all. This is a wall-mounted boot jack from early 20th century France. The padded U cradles your heel while you step on the wood and pull, using the rings to steady or hang the tool, perfect for tight riding boots. Selknam people from Tierra del Fuego, photographed in 1899 while being taken to Europe for ethnographic shows. Crowds paid to see these tours, many participants got sick, and the scandal helped spark early debates on human rights and museum ethics. Goodbye at a Greyhound, United States, about 1942. Under Executive Order 9066, about 120,000 Japanese Americans, two-thirds citizens, were sent by bus and train to guarded camps across the West. A small wave, then miles of unknown road. Easter 1944, Belgrade. Families walk out with bags and toys after heavy air raids, leaving homes under occupation behind. The Allied bombing that day pushed thousands to the roads and became one of the city's most remembered wartime evacuations. This is an electrophone table from the early 1900s. Subscribers in Britain plugged stethoscope-style earpieces into those side holes to hear live theater and church services sent over telephone lines, with the wiring hidden under the lift top. 3 women in high-fashion Gibson girl style pose on a city street around 1900. Their wide hats, gloves, parasol, and S-bend corsets show the rise of ready-made clothes and a growing black middle class claiming public space with style. March 1938. Members of the Black Cabinet, New Deal advisors led by educator Mary McLeod Bethune, pose for photographer Addison Scurlock. From 1933 to 1945, they worked across more than 30 agencies, pushing the White House for fair relief. A wealthy woman sits in a cadeirinha sedan chair in Brazil around 1860, carried by enslaved people. Brazil ended legal slavery in 1888, the last country in the Americas to do so. Black Allied soldiers hold a snowy trench in France in 1944. Despite segregation, units like the French Tirailleurs and the 761st Tank Battalion helped free towns in the Vosges and Alsace and earned high honors. Senior yearbook photo of Barack Obama at Punahou School in Honolulu, taken in 1979. This teen would become the 44th President of the United States in 2009. A Cairo water seller offers a drink from a goatskin bag and brass cup, while a mother in a yashmak veil holds her child, an everyday street scene recorded in 1944. These vendors, called saka, once kept the city cool before modern taps spread. Ulysses S. Grant shares a formal dinner with President Andrew Johnson in the late 1860s. Soon after, the two clashed over Reconstruction. Grant backed Congress, and he won the election of 1868 to become the 18th president. Belt-driven press room at a black-owned newspaper. Printers hand-feed sheets while a line shaft drives the rollers, a common setup in the early 1900s. From Freedom's Journal in 1827 to the Chicago Defender, these papers carried news. On set in Senegal, director Ousmane Sembène guides his crew. The novelist turned filmmaker often shot in Wolof so everyday people could see themselves on screen. His film Black Girl in 1966 put sub-Saharan cinema on the world map, and his touring projector brought movies to villages far from theaters. Brooklyn, early 1900s. Little Alphonse Capone sits with his mother Teresa, an Italian immigrant seamstress. Born in 1899, he would later move west and become one of the most famous public figures of Chicago's roaring 1920s. Coal Country, 1946. A miner's wife fills a basin from a single cold water tap, the main sink in many company houses. In the years just after the war, much of rural America still lacked hot water and indoor bathrooms, improvements that came later with union pressure and federal electrification. 1918, France. United States Ordnance men show heavy body armor at Fort de la Peignée after range tests, its plates pitted by impacts from sidearms, rifles, and machine guns. The results explained why most trench troops skipped full torso plates and foreshadowed later steel helmets and modern ballistic vests. Wooden board for the German dice and coin game Glückshaus, likely from the late 1800s or early 1900s. Players place coins on numbers and roll dice, and the center 7 is the king's house that pays. Many old sets lost small parts like pegs or coin cups. Vladimir Lenin sits with relatives inside the Kremlin in autumn 1920, one of the few casual family photos of him. A pet cat sneaks into the frame, a quiet slice of home life while he spent long days on state work. Ethel Granger in 1959, famous for a waist of about 13 inches after years of corset training. Her striking hourglass look, made with steel corsets and daily lacing, later inspired designers and even a Vogue cover in 2011. Derry, January 30th, 1972. A civil rights march descends into chaos as troops confront protesters in the Bogside. The day, later called Bloody Sunday, became a turning point in the Troubles and reshaped global opinion on Northern Ireland. Vietnam, February 1968. A three-man U.S. Marine long-range marksman team steadies their aim during the Tet Offensive. The Corps' formal sniper program began in 1966, and by 1968, teams used scoped M40 rifles with a spotter to guide precise, long-distance fire. April 1970. Marilyn Lovell reads the headlines as Apollo 13 faces a sudden oxygen tank failure just 2 days after launch. The crew turned their lunar module into a lifeboat, looped around the moon, and splashed down safely on April 17th. Bondi Beach, Sydney, circa 1900. Crowds wade in hats, boots, and full-day clothes because strict bathing rules and modesty codes still shaped seaside trips. Within a decade, Bondi would spark Australia's surf life-saving movement and modern swimwear, reshaping the beach culture we know today. GM's Aerotrain, unveiled in 1956, used city bus bodies on lightweight rail cars with a diesel locomotive nose to promise cheap, fast travel. The look stunned crowds, but the ride was harsh and underpowered, so only a few were built and they were retired within a decade. Sammy Davis Jr. performs for the 1st Cavalry Division in Vietnam in 1972, wearing unit fatigues and singing into a field microphone. He made several USO tours during the conflict, lifting morale for thousands of service members. Los Angeles River in 1938. Floodwaters buckle a Southern Pacific rail bridge as record winter storms turn the channel into a roaring torrent. The disaster pushed the city to harden the river with concrete and new dams, reshaping LA's flood control for decades. Men from both armies stepped out of the trenches on 24 December 1914, met in no man's land, and even posed for photos. They traded food, sang carols, and kicked a football before returning to the fight the next day. A rare pause in a vast conflict. July 17, 1955. Disneyland opened, and a live coast-to-coast TV special made it a national event, watched by an estimated 70 million people. Main Street's first parade rolled past Tomorrowland cars, launching the modern theme park era. An early Coca-Cola delivery truck around 1910, likely a Ford Model T panel van with hand-painted branding. In this era, Coke was spreading a coast-to-coast bottling network, and most servings came from soda fountains. The famous Contour bottle arrived in 1915. Rush hour at 5th Avenue and 42nd Street in 1926, just outside the New York Public Library. The ornate Mid-Street Tower is a manually operated traffic booth used before modern stoplights, directing trolleys, early taxis, and dense crowds.